Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. I want to give you a reference to go by here. It's like wax on, wax off. And and the poor guy, that he does not get any relief from that. It happens to him all the time. Our Brachelle's with us. Brachelle, how are you?
I am amazing. I'm super excited. We have Chris Natzke. Is that right?
Natzke.
Yes.
Natzke with us today, who is a sensei of all things, hence as to why Kevin references that. So thank you for being here, Chris. And I'm excited to have this conversation. I don't think I've ever met somebody who actually would say that they were a sensei. So that's pretty cool.
Good. It's great to be here. Thanks, Brachelle. It's great to be here.
And an 8th degree black belt, which is like 8 degrees and plus some more than I've ever achieved. I was a boxer at a time when then I fell over, and that was that. Anyway, so Chris does much more than being a black belt. He works with organizations and individuals who want to inspire themselves and their teams to reach higher levels of leadership, teamwork, passion, and breakthrough results in both their personal and professional lives by adopting a champion mindset, which he developed all by himself. He's also got a book entitled Breaking Through, and we're going to talk about all that during the course of the show. And but I got to ask you, Brachelle, I never did martial arts. I put my kids through it because I thought it would be very, very beneficial for them, and it was. Did you ever do martial arts?
I did. I did karate. My dad taught me American boxing and then learned it a little bit more as I grew up. And then my mom is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and their footwork was also in boxing. So I've learned a little bit, not really necessarily practiced it, which is probably good, but it's what I've learned is it's not about being able to beat somebody up or even really defend yourself. It's about the mindset that it creates. Would you agree with that, Chris?
I would absolutely agree with that. Absolutely agree with it. And in fact, it basically is the metaphor and the premise that I use in my speaking and coaching, which, as Kevin alluded to, that champion's mindset, which is developed in martial arts. So again, it's not just the physical attributes that you do, although you do get physical, but it's how you grow as a person, the character you develop, the spiritual expansion that you experience. So it's all those things combined.
And I love the concept of a spiritual expansion and expansion of your own mindset, so that there are things that you can do that you had no idea that you even were capable of. But a lot of times you need a sensei. Now, a sensei is a teacher. That's I believe that's the word that sensei means, isn't it?
It is. It's a Japanese word meaning sensei. I'm a practitioner of Korean martial arts. So the name in the Korean martial arts would be a little bit different. It's called sabum nim, but sensei tends to roll off the tongue a little bit easier with American tongues, as well as it's a word that most people in America are not familiar with.
And but sensei, because of movies like Karate Kid, which I reference, wax on, wax off, and stuff. And I just watched that the other day. I was so impressed with the attitude, and it isn't the physical abilities. It's the attitude that a real practitioner, not somebody who is faking being a practitioner, but somebody who really follows the entire process, including the spiritual development and the knowledge development and the mindfulness and the my champion's mindset. How it isn't. Well, as an example, I'm willing to bet there are lots and lots of black belts running around or walking around and who you will never know that's what they are and that's what they do, because they're not showy, they're not flashy. It's not about that, right?
Absolutely. And some of the best martial artists that I've known in my life, and I've known tons, are those people that's the way they carry themselves. They're humble, they're gracious, they're compassionate, because what we're trying to do is we're attempting to transform the entire person, not just from a physical standpoint. And as you move through the martial arts, what you notice is that when you start to gain these skills where you can do bodily harm, there's almost a reverence to it, right? You understand the power that you're beginning to accumulate, and so there is a much deeper sense of respect that you have for life, right? At least that's how I feel. And so, and if martial arts was just about kicking and punching, and there wasn't a practical application in life, then it would just be exercise, right? And probably good exercise. But we want to do is develop the person as a totality so they're able to live the best lives they can.
And I have, since I drove a bus for 12 years, I do have some advice for somebody. If you get into a verbal argument with somebody who is calm and just standing there and telling you to just back down and just relax and stuff, I would be very concerned if I were you.
I would agree.
because it isn't about showiness, and it's not about showboating, and it's about the mindfulness and the spiritual nature of what you can do and what your body can create when it has to. But it's not about creating that for showiness or to be tough.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, oftentimes you'll see the people that may be coming across in, from an overconfident standpoint, if you will, they're the ones that oftentimes will have the greatest lack of self-esteem because they feel they have to show that. And that's not just in martial arts. I think that's in life in general. But the most wise and sage teachers that I've been involved with, both in the martial arts or if it was in the corporate world, in business of any sort, are the people that have a centeredness to them. There's a quiet confidence about them. And there's also a willingness to really want to give and to help people that they're around grow and expand. And that, to me, is what leadership is about.
Yeah.
What's it like being a national Taekwondo champion?
It's not much different than who I was before I got it, right? It's the same attributes that helped me get to that level and a high level black belt and also win a national championship so many years ago are the same attributes and the skills and the strategies and tactics that I use in my everyday life. It was just applying it at that point in time to a goal that I had to win a national championship. But they're applied in business, they're applied in relationships, they're applied in overall the way that I take care of myself from a spiritual standpoint, a mental standpoint, a physical standpoint. So those attributes are really the same.
I have to ask you, because somebody is asking me in this audience, and that is, the martial arts is primarily an Eastern philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you view the Western cultural philosophy, which is much different, much more shallow, and much more aggressive?
Yeah, I think that every culture has their positives and their negatives. I mean, I think that what we learn in the West is we learn to grow and expand and build things and, modernize things. And I think if you went to like the birthplace of Taekwondo, you went to Korea, because of their Western influence, they grew by leaps and bounds. They hosted the Olympics in 1988, and now they're a thriving economic country. So there's some positives there. From an Eastern standpoint, though, and particularly the martial arts overlay, is we have a tendency to be more centered, to be more present, to also know that there's an inherent humility and respect for others that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily in a pure Western culture. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but it's, the martial arts is a reflection of the culture in which it was created from. So those attributes that you have in a martial art from Korea or from Japan or China oftentimes will reflect the culture that they originated from. And so again, I think there's positives and negatives from each and every one, but it is about being mindful. It is about being respectful of others, to learn confidence, to learn how to break through those limiting beliefs that have held us back. They just become part of the inherent nature of what martial arts is all about.
There was a television show, and this is way before Rochelle was around. And it was David Carradine was in it. It was called Kung Fu. It was the first time I'd ever seen a glimpse of the Eastern philosophy of life and taking care of each other. And was that just pure Hollywood, or was there
No.
Oh, good.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, that was the reason that I started martial arts. So I started in September of 1973, and it was because the Kung Fu television show was on. I grew up in this little town in southeastern Wisconsin. Martial arts at the time was not like it is today, where if you're driving down in Seattle, you'd probably see a martial arts school on almost every other corner, right? It wasn't that way at all. In fact, at the time that I started, it was mostly a practice that was done by adult males in the early to mid 20s. So that's what it was. And now all of a sudden I come into this martial art club, if you will. It wasn't even a school. It was a community center program. And I was basically the only kid. I'm 10 years old. I'm working out with adults. And it really wasn't until the first Karate Kid movie came out in the early 80s that children began flocking to martial arts schools because of exactly what you said before, Kevin, which is this amazing impact that martial arts was having on someone young. So, I'd like to say I was there. I was, almost 10 years ahead of that curve, growing up in the martial arts as a child and then into a young adult with that influence. But it was the Kung Fu television show, and the philosophies within are very inherent within martial arts today.
And those philosophies, Rochelle, when you were in taking karate and stuff, did they impart a philosophy to you? Is that normal in the schools that you attended?
I wish I could say yes, but really no. Well, I think where I learned that from is more of what I was taught from other people who had the background of learning it. But when I went specifically, it wasn't really necessarily about that. And I think a lot of it was I was small and I was a little bit feisty, and I needed to be able to protect myself if my mouth got me in trouble or something happened, at certain
Which
times.
happens
But
on a regular basis, by the way.
no, no, not anymore. Come on now. But there was a lot of learning in it. It wasn't a very long period of time, but it did teach me that you can, like, the boundary between what you teach yourself you're capable of and what you're not is very powerful. And I think that helped me from a very early age, because later on when I continued to go into sports, it carried that same mindset of whatever I believe I can do is going to power me, whether I do it, whether I don't, but not just physically, but also mentally. So I think it led into, many people may think, oh, well, I can't do a backflip on a trampoline. There's no way. And they will never do it. But if a person is like, you know what, somehow, some way, without breaking my neck, I'm going to learn how to do this, you'll be able to do it. And I love that you mix those two things into play and even put mindset before it, because any action, anything physical, it all starts with something mental. And
Right.
then it plays out into an action, right?
Yeah. Well, and it starts with a decision. It starts with the
Right.
decision to take that action. People, when they start martial arts or any physical activity, gymnastics, you name it, they probably don't 100% have an idea of the end result they want to achieve. But what they do is they take the first step. And then what happens is the next best step will show up. And then they'll just continue to follow that path. The students that I teach, one of the things that I want to do is I want them to understand and embrace the goal of earning a black belt early on in their training, because now that's what helps carry them through. And I'm proud to say I've got over 2,000 students here in the Denver area that have received their black belt from me. And the other thing that I'm probably proudest of is many of those people were not the most physically gifted, the most confident, the most self-assured, the best in shape, but many of them just kept showing up. And some of them that started out with the greatest difficulty beginning became some of my best black belts because they understood what it was like to move through the adversity and have that perseverance in order to attain that rank. And in fact, we say that a black belt is a white belt that never quit. A black belt is a white belt that never quit.
Exactly. I love that.
That is so true. I got to ask you, because I'm an advocate of two things for as kids are growing up in the United States today. One is take them and put them in improvisational drama. It will serve them in a myriad of ways of learning how to speak, stand up on their feet, have confidence. But the other one is martial arts, because of what it teaches them on a spiritual and a whole body nature. Now, I got to ask you, does a parent need to be concerned, or do they need to vet the dojo that they go to make sure that it's the right dojo, the right sensei, the right teacher that's going to give their kids the idea of how it should be done and not some blustery thing?
Yeah, I love that question. And I oftentimes will tell this to people who are inquiring about martial arts for their kids. And by the way, I 100% agree with you. I really believe that my origin as a professional speaker came from assisting and then eventually teaching martial art classes, because I felt at a very young age very comfortable in front of a room. So that was the origin of that. And most times from a leadership standpoint, you have to be a good communicator. So if you want to develop good leadership skills, learn how to communicate. That being said, when you ask the question about seeking a school that was going to be best for someone's child, I oftentimes will tell people when they ask me, well, what's the best style? Is it karate? Is it kung fu? Is it jujitsu? Is it taekwondo? I will always tell them the same thing. At particularly its very basic level, striking arts are basically the same. What you want to do is you want to see an instructor who connects well with your child, that's teaching great value lessons and character development in there, and that a child can relate to them, where they can respect them but not be fearful of them, right? And also having an orderly fashion in the class. So we always say there's a difference between having fun and being funny. So teaching children that they can have fun when they have a specific goal that they're trying to train with, and they're trying to focus on something right in front of them, versus being silly and funny, which has its place too, just not on the martial art deck, because we're teaching them some things where they could hurt themselves or others. But yes, absolutely, it's 100% find an instructor that your child and you relate to, and that is the best first step in finding a school for your child.
I think that's awesome advice, because I would love to believe that everybody, I mean, in the Karate Kid, there was, the bad sensei was mean and all that. There aren't really guys that are out there, or are there guys that are out there that are like that?
Well, I would have to say that the majority of the people that I know in the industry are not that way. But I think it's like any industry. You're always going to have people that are at the top of their game and some that aren't. Some of them think that, particularly folks that haven't been trained by, this is my experience, maybe haven't been trained by someone in an Asian culture of martial arts. Not to say that you have to be, but I find that sometimes those people try to be more Asian than their instructors were, right? Because they're having to compensate for it, right? And so the idea is that you want to have discipline. One of the things I always teach my students is I'll ask them the question. I'll say, does martial arts teach discipline? And of course, they'll almost all the time say, yes, sir. And I'll say, no, it doesn't. Martial arts teaches self-discipline. So you want to be able to find a program for your child, an instructor for your child, that's going to teach them to be disciplined about their protocols in martial arts, in school, and in life, whether someone is standing over them or not. That's one of the greatest gifts that we can give the young people in our society, in terms of my perspective.
Because I don't know if everybody knows this, and we need to take a break, but people are not necessarily watching you all the time, but you are.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
We'll be right back.
You became a real estate agent for freedom, success, and real momentum. So why are you still stuck waiting for closings to save you? I'm Ophir Adar, founder of Real Momentum, and I help agents like you become seven-figure earners. My first client that I coached, brand new agent, made $250,000 back in 2006. What's the secret? You feed your white wolf. That's the part of you that's bold and unstoppable and a closer and able to build rapport quickly. So click Get Listings at Real Momentum and let's unleash your real estate potential.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald and Brichelle. She's right over there. And, you know, and Chris Natzke is our guest. And if you go to his website, which is chrisnatzke.com, I would hire him to be a speaker. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But before I go there, Chris, somebody like, I don't know. I'll pick, Brichelle. She's standing right there or sitting right there. She was a figure skater of note for a long time. And do those translate well? If somebody is a gifted athlete in one, can they be a gifted athlete in becoming a black belt and learning the arts?
I think it works both ways. First, I'd say absolutely yes. I think that if someone has a good idea of how to control and move their body, they can definitely thrive in martial arts. That being said, I think the other thing is also true, which is martial arts becomes a wonderful antecedent, if you will, a wonderful support mechanism for other athletics. My own personal experience was I started martial arts when I was 10, but I also played football from the time I was in middle school all the way to high school. And as a result of blending those two, I earned a full scholarship to Northwestern University as a student athlete to play football for 4 years. Now, do I think I would have had the talent to play football at that level had it not been for martial arts? I can almost say absolutely not. So what martial arts did for me is it allowed me to have body awareness, taught me leadership, taught me how to be very focused on a task at hand. And so it basically helped me in terms of growing into that role as a collegiate athlete. So I think it works both ways. I think that sometimes, martial arts is great. Someone leaves another sport and they move to martial arts, that's great. But I think more times than not, when I had my school, Kevin, I used to say my competition was not the 6 martial arts schools in 2-mile radius of me. It was baseball and football and ballet and gymnastics, right? And so what I attempt to do because of my background is I encourage students to train in both because I saw the benefit in my own life and I also saw that in my students.
So, Brichelle, do you want to go back to do some more martial arts?
Yes. Yes. And this time for a completely different reason. And I love how you bring up that it's good just in balance with everything else. It's not something that it's like, you pick a sport like football, soccer, baseball, whatever you do, but it's that and everything else. It builds not only the confidence and the internalness, but having balance and how that affects you in your life, building strength, building the courage to have that be a part of who you are, because then other people learn from that. And I think that was one thing that I learned a lot in figure skating was how I was with myself set the example of other skaters, whether they had previously skated before me or whether they were new. I tried not to use the comparison in a negative way, even though it happened because we were young girls. But it built a lot of factors around who I was able to be and what I was able to think, okay, if I'm this person in this situation, how am I going to show up compared to if I chose to be somebody different? And I wish I would have realized that a little bit sooner, because I was like the daredevil, like if you dare me to do it, I have to do it. Like I was that kid that's like, no one's going to do it, but she will. And, and, there was a lot of discipline that I never learned before that I think back to, that I actually knew and I actually learned. It just didn't stick with me. And now that I think about it, a lot of times, a lot of people have experienced things like this where they know it, they've learned it, they've experienced, but it doesn't really stick and it doesn't really
Right.
stay. Um, do you think that's because it wasn't fully backed up by an understanding or a purpose?
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, I agree that you can learn many of the lessons in martial arts. You can learn those from other sports. I mean, I
Right.
learned the value of teamwork playing, competitive football. That's
Yep.
and there are sometimes, depending upon the coach, there can be some great life lessons you learn through the American sport world. That being said, most good martial art programs have the character development piece totally interwoven within their curriculum. So it's part and parcel. It's not something that happens occasionally. It's something that's integrated from the very beginning. And that's where I think martial arts has a real benefit to people, because it is teaching those two things simultaneously.
Now I gotta ask you this one, because it is near and dear to my heart. I played football also when I was in high school, and does the mindfulness training of martial arts tend to slow the game down a little bit so that you understand and your body moves? You understand you're in control of your body so that you can do the things that you need to be able to do, but also your mind is clearer because everything tends to slow down for you. Is that an figment of my imagination?
No, I would definitely say that that's an attribute and a benefit of martial arts. I mean, I was used to joke when I was competing, and particularly when I was competing in Olympic style Taekwondo, which is full contact, and you could either win or lose by knockout. You have a tendency to get very focused in that moment, right? You
Yeah.
learn how to be very present, and so yes, that definitely was a benefit that served me. Was being able to be when you are present and you're very focused on the task at hand, things do tend to slow down because you don't have the other things that are happening, the distractions on the side. So it's super important. And one of the things that we talk about in martial arts is the ability to focus, right? And that just is such a wonderful attribute for us to learn, particularly our younger generation, where we're in a world today that has better technology than we've ever had before, but we also have more distractions than ever before. I mean, next time you're at an airport, we were talking about airports before we started recording this. Just take a look at all the people that are on their cell phones as they're walking through an airport, and they aren't present to anything else around them. And when we're having that happen with kids, I think, this is my own personal opinion, it's a definite injustice that we're providing them with, because we're not teaching them and guiding them to be present with the task at hand.
It is so important to be present, and I hate to say it, but because Rochelle's of that generation, but I really just cell phones and computers that we have that we're carrying around with us all the time, and to be fair, parents and adults are just as bad as the kids, which is where they get it. But it is not a great way to go through life, because what is in your little thing has nothing to do with anything other than what's in your little thing.
Yeah.
And
I'll often say in one of my talks that I have a segment that I talk about what I call conscious persistence, meaning being conscious so that we can move through obstacles. And I'll say, the cell phone, people don't realize this, but it has more computer power in it than the lunar module that landed on the moon in 1969.
that's so true.
Amazing tool that we have. But what do we use it for? We use it to argue with strangers and watch cat videos. So there's this real dichotomy that's occurring, within it. So it's a wonderful tool, and I do my business off of my phone, and I use it every day, and I have to make sure that I'm also allowing myself to be present. particularly in my relationships and when I'm dealing with people, when I'm dealing with audiences, when I'm dealing with students, when I'm dealing with coaching clients, the power of presence is absolutely amazing in terms of helping us grow as individuals and make impact.
And by the way, we're talking with Chris Natzke, and that's Natzke. Go to chrisnatzke.com, find out all about him. And when we come back from our halftime break, we're going to talk about your coaching, but more so your speaking.
Beautiful.
And what you speak on and how impactful it is and how you use your energy in such a positive way to help other people maybe think about something that they hadn't considered or don't think they can for whatever reason. Can we do that?
Absolutely. I'd love to.
We will be right back with more on Positive Talk, and Brachelle's got computer issues or connectivity issues, and she'll be back at one point. So Chris and I will be right back.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
As you go about your daily life, look closer. As you gather with family and friends who love and support you, look closer. There are youth right in your community who don't have the home, warmth, and healing you have. So look closer. Every year across America, a staggering 4.2 million youth are homeless or trafficked. And for 50 years, Covenant House has worked relentlessly to keep them safe and protected. Tonight, 2,000 young people will sleep safely in a Covenant House bed. And tomorrow, they will wake up surrounded by love. They get clean clothes, hot meals, medical care, and a safe place to sleep. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In sites across America to help them fulfill the great promise of their lives. So look closer at Covenant House. To help or get help, go to covenanthouse.org.
And welcome back to Positive Talk, and we have Chris Natzke here. He is an 8th-degree black belt. He's a champion. He's got a book out called Breaking
Through.
Thank you. Breaking Through. And he is also a speaker of note, and he goes around and talks to a lot of people. And I wanted to, first of all, that commercial I play, Chris, I play that every time because I'm a firm believer that in the United States of America, having 4 million homeless or trafficked or kids that are in foster care is a huge crime.
Yes.
And we can fix it. This country can do anything. And we if we decided that we were going to fix it, we could fix it overnight. Don't you think?
100%. And, as I see that, I think of not only I speak in part of my message is talking about the power of service as leaders, and also what we do in martial arts as well, at least in my organization, which is to give back to community. And I really think, as a country that has the tremendous resources we have, I 100% agree with you. The fact that we do have people that are experiencing homelessness, particularly young kids in our society, is something that, if we put our mind to, we can turn it around, because it's something that is not only needed, but in doing that work, the way that we grow through giving back in that way is incredible as well.
And the reality is, people have never put the math to this, but 25% of kids that are in foster care and age out of foster care have a high school diploma. But more than 50% of them end up incarcerated.
Yep.
If they became members of society in a positive way, we would save a ton of money on prison space, because we are per capita the number one incarcerator in the world. I don't know if people know that, but we can do so much better. But back to Chris and what he does. What got you? You've been, a sensei, and you've worked with a lot of people. What decided you to go speak?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I originally, I of course was doing my speaking, if you will, in the corporate world. So prior to opening up my school in 1995, I was a sales manager and a corporate sales trainer. So I was in front of audiences in the corporate world of 500 people doing sales trainings and whatever. But when I opened up my martial arts school in 95, I was thinking, how do I differentiate myself between my competition in order to grow my school? And, I could run yellow page ads, I could put out signs, whatever. But I thought, well, I really think that the best way for me to do that is to go out and be a communicator about the benefits of what I can provide. And so I started doing it in grade schools, middle schools, high schools, et cetera. And that's where I really started my speaking. And then eventually I started getting invited to speak at different places, adult community organizations, et cetera. And it was basically using martial arts as a metaphor to help transformation occur in people's lives. And that was really what evolved into my business, which is now called Black Belt Leadership Speaking and Coaching.
That is beautiful. And now you're speaking in a lot of different places because you've gotten a bit of a reputation.
Well, I hope that's good news. I hope that's good.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I think that, the moniker that I've given myself is America's Breakthrough Sensei, because what I do through not only my keynote speaking, but also I have a specialized program I call the Breaking Through Board Breaking Experience. What I'm doing is I'm, again, using martial arts as a metaphor. So in my keynote speaking, I have basically 4 key elements that I speak about. I speak about having a purposeful vision, for your life and for your business. The idea of having conscious persistence, being able to move through those obstacles when they present themselves. The third, which we've already kind of spoken about, is compassionate service. I believe leadership is about being a compassionate servant. And then finally, taking inspired action to make a difference in the world. Martial arts is an action philosophy. So why not be able to take those attributes, those 4 attributes that we have in martial arts, and apply them to our everyday lives and businesses?
I'd like to address leadership if I could, because I think that is the one word that is so misused and such a misnomer in so many places. Because leadership, you're right. Leadership is about service, not about control.
That's correct. That's correct. And leadership starts with yourself. So, I'm a huge proponent of self-leadership, which is the attributes that you want to instill in others. The first person you need to do that with is yourself, because the best leaders are the ones that have gone through their own personal transformation and are still holding themselves to a higher standard so that they can then be the example and the teacher and the guide for other people to follow that. I've always loved the idea of, leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. And
Absolutely.
that society grows and expands.
Creating other leaders is, I think, the paramount job of a leader.
Yes, I would agree.
But there are some folks that will say, I don't want to create another leader because then I lose my great assistant. And I don't, you know what I mean? And they don't.
I do know what you mean. I don't know what the genesis of this was in my life, but I have always just loved developing people and then have them go on and be successful. That's just something that's been inherent within me. And quite honestly, in my martial arts career, I was very blessed that most of my staff members that I developed stayed with me for a long period of time. And then they eventually went on, and now they're all doing great things in the world. But, I think that if you are looking at it from a perspective of, if I develop them too much, I will lose my best assistant, that's really looking at life from a scarcity mindset. And what I always feel we need to do, and it doesn't mean that when that person leaves, it's not difficult, but my gosh, what if we were able to then help develop the next person? And what we do in martial arts, at least we did in my schools, is while I had my top people in place, I was still also developing people beneath them. So when they did leave, I had one next person to come up and take their role. So that development of leadership didn't stop at one level. It continued to permeate throughout the school.
And it's all based upon the premise that I care about you as a person, as an individual. I want the best for you. And if you're willing to work hard, then you can accomplish anything you want to. Then let them choose what they choose to do. And, so, and leadership development is a huge problem in our country, I think, personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that there are some great places where you can learn leadership, and then there are places where it's just really devoid. And unfortunately, I think that sometimes, particularly in the corporate world, you will, and you could probably see this in the educational world maybe too, is people move to positions of leadership based on their performance of doing a specific task, and they were successful at that task. So maybe they were a great salesperson, and they blew all their quotas out, and so now all of a sudden they become the sales manager. Well, just because they were good at sales doesn't mean they're going to be a good manager and leader. Just like in martial arts, you might be a great black belt, but if you haven't been developed as an instructor, you're not going to be a good teacher. So I think that there's two elements that need to be developed there. And I do think that there is a void at times, because if it's just based on performance and results and not teaching people how important it is to connect with others, to have an emotional IQ, right? To be able to relate with others and lead them and persuade them positively, we're at a real loss.
And what you just said is so true. I was in the food service industry and food sales, and I worked for major food companies. They tended, when they needed a district sales manager, and I had 11 people working for me when I was a district sales manager, but oftentimes what they would do is say, oh, well, we need another, they called him a district sales manager and stuff. And they would say, well, who's the best sales guy?
There you go. That's my point.
They would pick the best sales. Oh, this guy's great. He's got great numbers and stuff. But what they don't consider is that because it came easy to him, because he was really good at it, he had no earthly idea how to teach somebody else to do it.
That's right. And you'll see it in professional athletics, and this is maybe an antiquated example, but I remember years ago when Magic Johnson took over as coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, he was arguably one of the top basketball players of all time.
Yep.
Did not make a great transition to coaching.
Nope.
Because he didn't. Because in so many of those things, I think what happened in the example that I just gave is the game was so easy to him in many ways. And he was so passionate about it. And when other people didn't have the ease and the passion that he had, he couldn't relate to that. And he didn't know how to pull it out of people because he thought everyone had it because he had it. Right. And so there is, some of my best instructors in martial arts that I've developed were not necessarily my best athletic black belts, but they were the people that understood the difficulty it was to learn to move their bodies, to relate to their lack of confidence that they had, et cetera. They could relate to someone, and they sometimes became the best instructors. And they were, don't get me wrong, they were solid martial artists, but my very top athletes, maybe they weren't the best instructors.
And that's where we come into mindset, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And and I mentioned before the idea of a black belt is a white belt that never quit. And, to expand on the example I gave before, I've had over 2,000 students now that have received their black belt from me.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's one of the legacies I'm probably most proud of, because that every one of those people that got their black belt, at least the vast majority of them, since I started this specific program, not only had to do all the physical requirements, but they also had to create 400 random acts of kindness during the 4 months prior to them testing for their black belt. They had to eat clean for an entire week with no sugar, no processed foods, to learn to take care of their bodies. And they also had to spend either a day of empathy, which meant they spent a 24-hour period either being blind, deaf, mute, or in a wheelchair. So what we were doing is we were teaching those attributes of empathy within the training. Now, that being said, I can think of only 2 students when I first got them on the mat that as soon as I saw them, I felt they had every attribute it took to be a black belt. Physical flexibility, strength, tenacity, toughness, all those things, respect, focus. Only 2, though, that had it, all the attributes there. And one of them got their 4th degree black belt with me, and one got their 2nd degree black belt. But that meant, Kevin, there was another 1,998 that didn't have all those attributes at the beginning. But again, they just kept showing up. And some of them, when they did have that breakthrough, that's when they took off. And now they could apply that lesson of breakthrough, that tenacity, that focus, that intentionality, if you will, into all other parts of their lives.
So I would like to submit this, and we need to take excuse me, our last break, and then we're going to come back. But I would submit to you, sir, and I know that these folks have come back and talk to you because you're still Sensei, and I'm sure that they come in, and it doesn't matter how old they are now and stuff. But what you did and the work that you did with that is you created 2,000 extremely positive people that are working to make a difference in the world. Would you say that's true?
That was my intention, and I would like to say humbly, yes, I think that we succeeded in many ways about doing that.
Isn't that cool to be able to have folks come in and say, you know, Sensei, you changed my life.
Yeah, well, in fact, if we have time, we come back on the other side of the break. I've got a story that really illustrates that I'd love to share.
I would love to have that. This is just 30 seconds, so everybody just calm down. We'll be right back.
When the game is on the line, championship teams know the game plan. They communicate and work together to win. We all need a game plan to protect ourselves online. Talk to family and friends so they know how to stay safe too. Create strong passwords, turn on multi-factor authentication, update software, and recognize and report phishing, because online safety is not something you want to fumble. Get more game-winning tips at CISA.gov/secure our world. Then share them with family and friends.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald and Rochelle when she doesn't have computer problems. And Chris Natzke is here. He is an 8th degree black belt. He is a business leader. He's a coach and a teacher and a mentor and all of those things. And he has a story that we would like to relay about the depth and significance of the work that he does.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So this is a story that I will oftentimes tell when I'm speaking to high schoolers, youth groups, which I think is just a great illustration of tenacity as well as personal empowerment and taking inspired action. So I had a student named Nabil. Nabil came to me at about age 8. His mother and his sister, and he had moved from Southern California. And Nabil had trained in martial arts previously. And when he came to me, I think by his own admission, he would admit that he wasn't the best athlete. He wasn't the best martial artist. But Nabil just kept showing up. He just kept showing up. And pretty soon after a couple of years, he tests for his junior 1st degree black belt, and he just keeps showing up after that. And he gets his 2nd degree black belt with us. And he now is part of the leadership team. And demonstration team. So he's traveling around the state of Colorado demonstrating with us. And he's also now become part of my staff the senior year of high school. And he's one of these kids that you meet him and he's just electric. It's just his personality is just so exuberant. It's humble, but at the same time, it's enthusiastic. And the mothers loved him. The students loved him. And he's now 17 years old. He's a senior in high school. And he's getting ready to go off to college. And Nabil had a dream that he had shared with me during, an annual performance review. He had said that his goal was to study at the Colorado School of Mines, which is one of the top schools of engineering in the United States. And he wanted to follow in his stepdad's footsteps to do engineering in the petroleum industry. So I had known this goal for Nabil for quite some time. Well, one day I came into the school and Nabil was standing at the front desk waiting for me and asked if we'd go in the office and have a chat. So we sit down and I could tell he's not his normal self. He looks a little bit down on the dumpers, right? And he says, "Sir, I need to tell you, I got a letter today from the School of Mines and I've been rejected. They didn't accept my application." So, we sat there for a moment and just kind of dealt with that. And then I said, "Well, what is your plan? What do you want to do?" He said, "Well, I know what my plan is. I want to go off to another school here in Colorado, do my freshman year there, take my prerequisites that I would do at School of Mines and then reapply as a sophomore. I said, sounds like a great plan, buddy. Keep me posted. Well, I come back into school about 2-3 weeks later, and Nabil's waiting for me again at the front desk. But this time, his energy is a lot higher than it was the last time. So we sit down in the office, and he proceeds to tell me that as a 17-year-old, on his own accord, he reached out to the enrollment administrator, admissions administrator, and asked for a meeting. Now, the intention of the meeting wasn't anything other than he just wanted to find out what classes he needed to take at the next university, and then, come in and transfer in his sophomore year. But when he was there, he wasn't just an average student. He was Nabil. He was enthusiastic. He talked about his leadership skills. He talked about his love for martial arts. He talked about his passion that he had for wanting to study at School of Mines. And in mid-sentence, the administrator held up his hand. He said, "Stop right there. I'm admitting you to the School of Mines. Don't you ever get a C in chemistry again." That's why he didn't get admitted. But he admitted him right there on the spot, Kevin. And I get chills telling this story. And a couple of months later, Nabil tested for his 3rd degree black belt, and he went off. He had a successful college career. I believe he got his master's, and now he's doing the work he wants to in the world. But I share that story with young people because how many times when the first time you hear no, you just say, okay, I'll go on to something else. But he had a dream. He had a passion for what he wanted to do. And I would like to think that because of the support of his parents, but also the support that he got through martial arts, which is being able to have a conscious persistence, he went on his own accord and made his dream come true.
And I'm going to submit to you, young man, that because I've had this experience in my life, there have been several coaches that I've had. Several of them are now passed away. But my Little League coach, as an example, he made me who I am today. From 8 and 9 and 10. I wish he was still around so that I could show him what I've become and everything. So I'm going to submit to you that you were the driving force behind what happened with that young man and his decisions to be able to fight through it. And that, I know that makes you proud.
Yes.
It should make it, because that's a generational change that you're making you made in him. You probably impacted his parents and his siblings, if he had any, and all the way through. And it's not that you walk on water, although you could if you wanted to. You get a 9th degree black belt, I suppose. But it's that you are a caring, kind human that cares about other people. And have worked your whole life to make that happen. And congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I know that happens to you all the time. It happens to you all the time. People, I'm sure, in a restaurant or walking down the street, they say, "Oh, Sensei, I miss you. It's so nice to see you again. Did I tell you the time?" And then you get stuck for 10 minutes talking on the
That's okay. Those delays in my schedule are always welcome. And
it is so cool. So what's next for you, young man? You got lots of life and lots of passion. What are you going to do next?
Well, I'm constantly working on my speaking business. I mean, this is my new way of basically, if you will, taking it from the dojo into the world, if you will, right? Because there's so many of these attributes I know that people can be positively impacted on. They don't need to spend 5, 10, 20 years kicking and punching, or 52 like I have in order to get those results. And by being able to help people in that transformation, it's just something I absolutely love. So I do one-on-one coaching as well. I do group coaching in addition to that. And plus I'm still very active in the martial arts. So I'm really blessed in the work that I get to do. And, it's so interesting, Kevin. So many of us are always looking for our purpose. And many times I always say this with my clients, I ask them to reflect back on their life and the things that really lit them up and the times where they were the most impactful. And many times what you'll find is we're not looking for our passion. We've been living our passion our whole life. It may have showed up in different areas. But years ago, I had a student that I had taught when I was a high schooler, and he was a high school teacher. So he was maybe 15 years older than me. And we reconnected via social media. And he said to me, he said, you know what? Remember when they did that article about you in the local newspaper in our little hometown? I said, yeah, I sure do, Scott. He said, let me send it to you. I still have it in pristine condition. And so he sent it to me. I got it a couple days later. And Kevin, as I was reading it, and they were quoting me, the things I was saying to the interviewer, as a 17-year-old, 16, 17-year-old, are the same things I'm teaching today when I'm on stage, right? So those things that are instilled in us, those things that drive us, those things that animate us, that light us up, I would say to anyone in the audience, lean into those, because those are inherent within us. And those are our gifts that I believe we're meant to share in the world.
And I'm here to tell you that's when I was 42, I would have been a district sales manager and all that kind of stuff. Wasn't real happy. This, people would say, I got over 1,000 shows. I've got a beautiful co-host occasionally, and here she is.
Here she is.
And all of that, and people say, wow, this is what he's been doing his whole life and stuff. And it's like, there was a time when I was 42, I had no earthly idea how I was going to apply the gifts that I had. Yeah. And so you found your calling from a very early age, but I'm not going to tell people, or I am going to tell people, that it can be at any age.
At any age, absolutely. And it's not exactly the things that you're doing, it's the attributes that you're bringing to that place. That's what I would say to people. And many times for me, the underlying thing is service, right? Is how can we serve? How can we show up and be the best person that we can? Be compassionate, be inspiring, and to help people. And it's like, I think it was Zig Ziglar used to say, you know, the best way to get what you want is to help people get what they want, right? Is really, you know, when you live your life of service, that is where, you know, life just opens up for us. And when we want to expand and grow, you know, think about a vending machine. You know, when a vending machine isn't working, usually they don't have a sign on it that says it's broken. The sign says out of service. So if we're not living the lives that we really want to live, ask yourself, where can I be of service, and go apply yourself that way.
That's a beautiful thought. Rochelle, I know you've been listening.
Yes. I just got a very important phone call that I needed to take and found out some kind of sad information, but I was still listening. And actually the conversation in my head, and hard to think about anything else, is how much more I think about. I learn a lot, right? But you always learn, and you always grow, and you always change. And what that could mean for so many different more aspects that I'm putting into my space and my time and my life and what I'm focused on. Because I can make it, I can bring it into that sense of doing karate or doing a sport or an activity every day that I wake up. And that can kind of change a lot about, I think, the perspective that we have on just each day, because Kevin changed my life yesterday. And instead of telling me to let it be every day, since I've got that down, he said one thing at a time. And that's kind of the basis of what you learn in anything you do. If I learned anything.
And as Chris will tell you, never quit. Find your passion. Even if you fall down, get back up, find it, live it, and it will serve you over time if you are serving other people.
Right.
Yep.
Chris, it is just like awesome to have you here. Will you come back and see us again?
I would love to come back. Thank you.
It is so much fun. And go to his website, which is chrisnatzke.com. That's NATZKE.com. Find out all about him. You need to hire him and his company to speak in your facility, in your group, wherever it is, because they will say, I don't know where you found this guy, but then you got to bring him back.
Right on.
So thank you. Rochelle, anything before we go?
Nope. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. I cannot wait to have you back and see where I'm at in life so I can learn more from you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys. It's been my pleasure.
I know where she's going to be at in life. So, Chris, thanks again. And Rochelle, you need to stay there. I need to talk to you for a second.
Okay, sounds good. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another because each other's all we've got.